What happened to Zenith? It's a question many of us who remember the glowing dials and weighty cabinetry of a certain era have asked ourselves. A brand once synonymous with American ingenuity, with uncompromising quality, with the very idea that a piece of electronics should last a lifetime. Zenith was a name you trusted, a name your grandparents trusted, a name that proudly declared, the quality goes in before the name goes on. But somewhere along the way, that quality, that trust, that very name, seemed to vanish. For a generation, Zenith was the bedrock of American living rooms. From the early days of radio, through the golden age of television, and into the blossoming world of HiFi, Zenith was there. Think of those gleaming consoles, often crafted from rich walnut or mahogany, designed not just to entertain but to be a central piece of furniture, a point of pride. You didn't just buy a Zenith, you invested in it. You remembered the heft of its controls, the satisfying click of a rotary tuner, the warmth of the sound filling your home. My own grandfather had a Zenith console stereo, a behemoth from the late 1950s, and I can still conjure the scent of warm dust and vacuum tubes, the rich, buttery tone of a big band swinging through its speakers. It wasn't just electronics, it was an experience. Zenith's journey began, fittingly, with radio. In the 1920s, they quickly established a reputation for robust, sensitive receivers. They innovated constantly, pushing the boundaries of what was possible, from shortwave communication to early FM broadcasting. Their Trans-Oceanic portable radios, first introduced in the 1940s, became legendary. These weren't just radios, they were a lifeline for travelers, adventurers, and even soldiers, capable of pulling in stations from across continents. With their rugged build, distinctive wave magnet antenna, and beautiful leatherette cases, they were both a marvel of engineering and a statement piece. Holding one today, you feel the deliberate weight, the thoughtful ergonomics, the sense that every component was chosen for durability and performance. It was a philosophy that permeated their entire product line. As television emerged as the next big thing, Zenith was quick to adapt and excel. They pioneered the first commercial remote control in 1950, the Lazy Bones, connected by a wire to the set. Then came the groundbreaking Space Command in 1955, a wireless ultrasonic remote that operated with a series of distinct clicks. This wasn't just a convenience, it was a revolution. No more getting up to change the channel. Zenith understood the user experience long before that term became commonplace. They focused on reliability, on picture quality, on sound. Their Chromacolor picture tube, introduced in the late 1960s, became famous for its vibrant, lifelike colors, a direct challenge to RCA's dominance. Many argue it was the best color picture ever produced, and those who remember it often speak of its almost three-dimensional quality. But while television dominated their public image, Zenith's commitment to audio never wavered. Throughout the 1960s and into the 70s, they produced a range of solid, dependable stereo systems, from compact all-in-ones to separate components. Their receivers weren't always the flashiest, nor did they chase the bleeding edge of power output like some of their Japanese competitors. Instead, Zenith focused on what they knew best: rock-solid build quality, clear and musical sound, and a design aesthetic that was quintessentially American, understated, functional, and built to last. You'd find their receivers paired with sturdy turntables, often Garrett's or their own excellent changers, and speakers that, while not always audiophile grade, were well matched and delivered a pleasing, warm sound. There was a sense of cohesive engineering, that the entire system was designed to work together harmoniously. The late 1970s and early 1980s were a critical period for American electronics manufacturers. The market was changing rapidly, flooded with increasingly sophisticated and often more affordable products from Japan. Brands like Pioneer, Sansui, Kenwood, and Marantz were offering features, power, and often a level of perceived coolness that was hard for established American brands to match. Zenith, ever the pragmatist, responded with a mix of strategies. They continued to emphasize their core strengths, reliability and serviceability. They knew that a Zenith set, whether a TV or a stereo, was less likely to break down, and if it did, parts and service were readily available across the country. This was a powerful selling point for consumers weary of disposable electronics. However, the relentless price pressure was building. Zenith, with its higher labor costs and commitment to domestic manufacturing, found it increasingly difficult to compete purely on price. They began to explore manufacturing abroad, particularly in Mexico, a move that, while necessary for survival, started to chip away at the "Made in America" identity that was so central to their brand. This wasn't a quick, decisive pivot, it was a gradual, almost agonizing process as the company grappled with the changing global landscape. They tried to maintain their quality standards, sending engineers to oversee production, but the purity of the "quality goes in before the name goes on" mantra, once so absolute, began to blur. Zenith also attempted to diversify. They invested heavily in areas like high-definition television research, even developing an analog HD TV system in the late 1980s, long before digital HD TV became a standard. They poured resources into flat-panel display technology. These were forward-thinking moves, demonstrating their continued commitment to innovation. But these long-term, expensive research projects often failed to yield immediate profits, putting further strain on the company's finances in a brutally competitive market. The real problem, though, was already inside the company, and indeed, within the broader American electronics industry. It wasn't just about price or foreign competition, though those were significant factors. It was a fundamental shift in consumer expectations and corporate strategy. For decades, American manufacturers had focused on vertical integration, designing, engineering, and manufacturing nearly every component themselves. This allowed for incredible quality control and innovation, but it was also expensive and slow. Japanese manufacturers, on the other hand, often embraced horizontal integration, sourcing components from a vast network of specialized suppliers, allowing them to rapidly innovate, reduce costs, and accelerate product cycles. Zenith, rooted in its long history and deeply ingrained corporate culture, found it challenging to adapt quickly enough. They were still building tanks when the market was shifting towards nimble, feature-rich sports cars. The brand, which had always prided itself on doing things its own way, now found itself struggling to keep pace with a globalized industry that demanded speed and cost efficiency above all else. The very qualities that had made Zenith great, meticulous engineering, long product life cycles, and a focus on domestic production, became liabilities in a world hungry for the new and the cheap. The 1990s brought further challenges. The shift from analog to digital television was looming, requiring massive investment. Zenith, despite its pioneering work in HD TV, simply didn't have the financial reserves to compete with giants like Sony and Matsushita, Panasonic, who were able to leverage their vast global resources. The television market became a race to the bottom, where profit margins dwindled, and scale became paramount. By the late 1990s, Zenith's fate was largely sealed. The company that had once stood as a titan of American industry, that had built some of the most beloved and reliable electronics in history, found itself in dire financial straits. In 1995, after years of declining sales and mounting losses, Zenith filed for bankruptcy protection. The venerable American company, in an attempt to survive, eventually sold a controlling stake to LG Electronics, the South Korean conglomerate. Initially, LG continued to use the Zenith brand name, particularly for televisions, seeing the value in its residual recognition. You could still buy a Zenith television for a time, but the soul of the original company was gone. The R&D, the American manufacturing, the unique design philosophy, these were absorbed into LG's global operations. What remained was essentially a badge, an echo of a once mighty presence. Over time, even that echo faded, and the Zenith name largely disappeared from new products. So, what was lost? We lost a symbol of American manufacturing pride, certainly. But more profoundly, we lost a certain philosophy of product design, the idea that a company should stand behind its products for decades, that quality was not just a feature but a moral imperative, and that the relationship between manufacturer and consumer was built on trust. Zenith gear wasn't just functional, it had a soul, a robustness that hinted at the skilled hands and deliberate decisions that brought it into being. You felt that when you picked up a Zenith Trans-Oceanic, when you turned on a Chromacolor TV, or when you settled back to listen to a Zenith stereo. The quality didn't just go in before the name went on, it felt like it went into every single detail. Today, if you scour garage sales or vintage electronics shops, you might still find a Zenith. And chances are, it still works. That's its enduring legacy. It's a testament to a time when things were built to last, a time when a company's name was a promise, and quality wasn't just a marketing slogan, but the very foundation of its existence. It's a poignant reminder that sometimes, even the most deeply ingrained values can be eroded by the relentless tides of global competition and changing economic realities. But the spirit of those engineers, the pride of those factory workers, the satisfaction of millions of customers, that lives on, etched into the circuitry and the sturdy cabinets of every surviving Zenith product. It's a reminder of what we once created, and perhaps, what we can still aspire to. The story of Zenith is a familiar one for many storied American brands from that era. But what about the company that brought us the first widely available quadraphonic sound system, a brand that soared to incredible heights?